too, or some software. Real quick before we get started, I wanted to update you on a speaker we had a couple of months ago, Bill Cutlett, who talked about the OSIRIS-REx mission to Mars, which he was the mission to an asteroid, which he was the launch manager for back in 2016. And just to update everyone, or to remind you if you weren't there, the spacecraft tracked down the Bennu asteroid after 1.2 billion mile journey. It orbited this Empire State Building size asteroid for over a year, dropped down to a few feet from the surface of the asteroid, collected some space rocks, and returned to orbit, and where it's been for another year. And as promised by Bill 2 weeks ago, it fired its rockets and began its 1.5 year journey back to Earth, or 2.5 years. And 2.5 years from now, it's going to fly by Earth, drop a capsule with a parachute that's going to land on like a Tuesday afternoon on the Utah desert with the most space rocks we've collected since we went to the moon 50 years ago. And oh yeah, and by the way, I didn't know this until yesterday, but the main spacecraft then keep going, and the mission hopes to get it to another asteroid before it dies and have it mapped that as it's done the other one. So that's not quite the accomplishment of designing one of these things for your bathroom, but it's still a pretty good thing to talk about. So congratulations to Bill and the OSIRIS-REx team. So. All right, next we have a poll. It's been a long time since we've been together, and I think people have missed it. And I see, when I look at the screen tonight, I see neighbors and friends, and I see my college roommate, some families, and some colleagues, and a bunch of previous speakers. And it kind of brings up the question of when are we going to get together again? And we want to get your opinion on that. So I'm going to put a poll out there, if I can do this right. And I'd like you to respond to it. Okay, everybody see it? It's 2 questions. Look like we're getting most of them in. Looks like we've slowed down quite a bit.
I think, Stan, most people are on the second question, if we can give it another moment or two.
Okay. Looks like it's slowed down pretty well, don't you think? Okay.
Good.
Okay. And y'all are seeing it as fast as I do. Interesting. So for an outside meeting, 80% would attend gladly, and another 11. Okay. That's great. And for the inside meeting, almost half. So, and about 75 would be at least considered, it looks like. It's very interesting. So we've had a couple of questions, a couple of comments. One, I think, I don't was that it would depend on how many people were attending and so forth. And I purposely didn't do that because I didn't know really what circumstances we might be doing it about. And I do appreciate the feedback, and we will take that into account and see what we can do in the future. So, All right. I wish we had if we were in person, we could have a discussion about this. So, but we will be talking about it more in the future, I'm sure. So thank you very much. All right. Let's see. Okay, so now we're ready to talk about today's topic. Bill Martin, who many of you saw spoke, and almost as many went to view his speech on YouTube or on video, made 2 points since the last meeting. One was that he wants to do Entrepreneur to help him with a special event at the Valentine at some point in the future. He's got a issue there that he wants some help with and wants some creative thinking on how to present something that's a controversial topic. And he said he'd like to get us together and brainstorm about 50 to 75 people. So we're going to be talking about that in the future. And second, and very important today, is he introduced me by email and by reputation to today's speaker, Greg Werkheiser. Greg's a classic entrepreneur. He isn't happy with doing just one thing really well. He's a lawyer and co-founder of Cultural Heritage Partners, a global law firm that tackles controversies involving the protection of artifacts, architecture, landscapes, folkways, and all sorts of things like that. His team has recovered Nazi-looted art, defends American Indian sacred sites, and battles the black market trade in looted antiquities, and all the while working to achieve a balance between development and historic preservation in areas as diverse as the ancient Pompeii and Richmond's Monument Avenue. But he's not just a lawyer, he's also an entrepreneur. He's CEO of ARtGlass, a Richmond startup that was developed a product that combines wearable, transparent sunglasses with augmented reality software that brings a AR experience to millions of visitors to museum and historic sites. His sites include Pompeii, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, Mount Vernon, Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, and even the Monument Avenue here in Richmond. And I didn't know this when I did it, but a year or two ago, I went through a museum, the James Monroe Museum, and our facility, and used his glasses there. So I'd actually used it before I even met him. So today, Greg's going to explore how history, technology, and intelligence are intermingling to reshape our understanding of the past and future. Introduce Greg Werkheiser.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to share my PowerPoint screen. Let's see here. Okay, everybody sees that?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. Well, I appreciate the invitation to join you today. I've gone through and taken a look at all the amazing folks that you've had as speakers over the years. I'm delighted to be in their company, and eager to hear your response to some of the things that we're going to throw out there today. I thought we would divide our time today into 3 parts. The pie chart shows that they were equal parts. We will see by the time we get to the end whether or not that proves to be true. But first, I thought I might take you on a little bit of a tour of the wearable augmented reality company that my colleagues and I run, as a gentle way of starting a practical conversation about the intersection of the past and the future and technology. And then I want to step back, hope not way too back, and talk bigger picture about the importance of cultural heritage as we move into an age of the exponential growth in technology, an age of superintelligence, and then look forward to getting your questions, comments, and critiques. So a little primer on ARtGlass. We are a software and services company based here in Richmond, Virginia, and with offices in Milan. We are intentional about being a Virginia company. I've been in Virginia for 25 plus years now. Spent a number of years living in California in the meantime, in Silicon Valley, and made a conscientious choice that when we were starting our tech company, we wanted to be out of that environment and in a East Coast common sense environment where we could be perhaps a bigger fish in a slightly smaller pond, but where folks frequently underestimate from the South the ideas in terms of emerging technologies that are coming forth. And so it's exciting for us to have been in a situation where so many of our friends in the Virginia community in terms of museum space and leadership and in the investment space have really become collaborators and partners in this business. We have amazingly over the past 4 years become the premier company doing what we do in the world, and that is bringing a certain form of augmented reality technology to cultural sites specifically. And I'll give you a little bit of a demo of what that looks like in a minute. We have had millions of paying visitors go to about 50 sites and deployments around the world. We have a lot of those in Italy, in part because our chief technology officer is there, and in part because Italy has more world UNESCO sites than any other country in the world, and it's an interesting challenge for us to do ancient sites in terms of the technology that we're deploying. But the types of sites that we've deployed this technology to run the gamut from ruins to museums to here in the United States, presidential estates. We're working on an aquarium right now, which is an interesting challenge. And the concept here is that we're not doing virtual reality, which most of you know involves putting on a set of goggles that effectively block 100% of your view of the real world and therefore surround your eyes with a completely contained environment. Doesn't allow you to walk around so much. You're generally seated or tethered or you're on your couch. Amazing technology, but distinguished from what we're doing, which is you're wearing, in some cases, a pair of transparent smart glasses that allow you to walk around in the real world, but layered over your real world view of art and artifacts and landscapes and buildings is this digital magic that augments your experience of the real world. And the aim is to show greater context, to bring a greater sense of storytelling to people's experience of art and architecture and history and culture. And so we bring people and voices and monuments and buildings and landscapes, sometimes that have long ago disappeared. We can recreate them and put them in the place in the world that they were and give them a powerful voice as a way of educating folks. The long-term, or I should say the baseline goal, is to give visitors to cultural sites a kind of transformed experience, one that has greater intellectual impacts. That is, they retain more learning about the experience and about the content, and also it hits them in a way that is sustainable afterwards. It hits them in their emotional core one way or the other, can make them laugh, can make them cry, can make them really ponder some deep questions, and that, in our experience, leaves them with a different and distinguishing and superior experience than what they might have had otherwise in a traditional environment. It was, how did I get into the tech world as somebody who still has trouble figuring out sometimes how to turn my computer on in the morning or how to work Zoom? The answer is I am not a technologist. So the irony of running a cutting edge technology company is brought home to me just about every day. But we have partnered with some of the smartest technologists working in this space in the world. And what my co-founder, who's also my spouse and also my co-partner at our law firm, Marion, and I brought to the table was an understanding of the cultural sector, having served it and continuing to serve it for more than 10 years through our law firm, which, as Stan mentioned earlier, on a day-to-day basis deals with the questions of who owns heritage, who owns history, who owns art, who has access to it, how should it be protected and preserved, how can we leverage the lessons of the past for greater societal progress. Those are the things that we struggle with on the law and policy side, and those are the same types of questions that I wanted to answer from a slightly different perspective by bringing some technology into the equation. So I'm gonna escape here for a second, and on the theory that a video is worth 1,000 words, I'm gonna attempt to, let's see, share this little promo video that our company puts out, not for the purposes of promoing, but for the purposes of showing you in video in a demo that we did at the VMFA, what this kind of looks like on the ground. Let's see here. Can you all hear that?
We are not seeing or hearing the video, Greg.
Okay.
We still see the PowerPoint.
All right, I'm going to stop that share. I'm going to do a video share. Where are you? Ten more seconds and we'll have it going. Let's see. Or will we not?
I think
Anything
it's coming up. We
It is?
we have video.
Okay. Let's see if the audio works. If not, you'll get to hear me give the audio and you'll get to see the video, which is the important part anyway.
Only have video.
Okay. I'll give you the narration in just a second. Okay, and I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint deck. All right. So the point of the video, 80% of it anyway, is to not hear my self-narration, but to get a sense of what happens when you put on these transparent smart glasses. You go to an institution that is in many ways prepared for the past 30 years to hand you an audio guide, and is now prepared to hand you this high-end piece of technology that creates this immersive experience for you. So how does it work? Can you all see that slide? Okay, so to be clear, we are a software company. If you were to go out on the internet today and pay somewhere between $1,500 and $3,500 for a pair of augmented reality smart glasses, either produced by Microsoft, or in this case, we frequently use Epson, the same company that produces your overhead projectors and your printers. That hardware does not come with any software. It's basically kind of a dead in the water tool unless somebody develops an app to make it useful. And that's largely what we've done. We've developed software to make these super cutting edge smart glasses useful in the real world. So how it works is, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see there's a little camera embedded in the glasses. Our company has hacked facial recognition software and applied it to art and objects. So we have an algorithm that we load into the hardware. And as a person is wearing the glasses and looking around, and the audio and the visual cues will say something like, look at the statue of George Washington. You turn to look at the statue of George Washington, the algorithm recognizes through the glasses that you're looking at a statue of George Washington, and then it pins digital content around the real world object, or it pins it on the landscape. The advantage of this particular technology over what you may have seen in other contexts, which is, you're holding up your phone and you're doing AR this way, this is pretty common these days, or you're holding up a tablet, is that those little squares in the middle of those glasses are deep enough that they trick your eyes into creating true depth perception. So it creates a 3D experience. The Jaws shark is coming to get you, right? Versus when you hold it up on your phone, it's still interesting, but perceived by your eyes as two-dimensional. Over time, the theory is that the technology disappears, and it might be initially kind of gimmicky and fun to put it on, but what matters is, because it's hands-free and your head is up and you're experiencing the content of the tour, you're immersed in the storytelling, and eventually the technology becomes less noticeable. It is three-dimensional. It's also 360 degrees, as you'll see with some of the little demos I'll play for you in just a second. The idea is that this is mixed reality. So we are not attempting to substitute this augmented experience for the entire experience of going to a museum. Frequently, we will augment a portion of what you see at the museum. So you can keep the glasses on, you can pull them down, you can experience something unaugmented and then go to another exhibit that's augmented, right? It's intended to be a blend into the standard tour offering. The other advantage in terms of the intellectual retention and the emotional piece is that it's multi-sensory. This isn't just video that you're getting, you'll have headphones in at the same time, so you get the audio experience plus the video experience. We've been able to do this indoors, which is slightly easier, and outdoors, which is very hard because you have shifting lighting conditions, different weather conditions. It's been incredibly difficult, but we're proud to kind of distinguish ourselves right now as the only company that's taking this equipment outdoors onto landscapes like at Mount Vernon or ancient Pompeii. The software that we designed is designed to work across any of the hardware that comes out. Most frequently, we're, as I mentioned, using Epson hardware because of its form factor, its long battery life, etc. I have this point in here about age neutral. A lot of folks look at this and think, oh, this is not for boomers or folks in that age bracket. This is going to attract the kids. This is a gimmick for museums to get kids in. What's been fascinating to us is that in our analysis, people are taking this experience in equal numbers, whether it's Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, or boomers, but they're taking it for different reasons. The younger folks are attracted to the experience because of the sexiness of the technology. And oh, by the way, then they love the content. Older folks are thinking, well, the only way I can get this content, this rare and interesting content, is by putting on these weird glasses. I'll tolerate that to get the content. And then they end up surprising themselves that the technology is easier to use than they thought. And then ultimately, the other aspect of what we do is we have a platform where if you are a museum and you want to develop your own content, it's very easy to move that content in and out of the landscape that creates the augmentation within your field of view. So if you've ever used Canva or MailChimp, you know how you can kind of drag those boxes around. We like to think that our software, when it comes to this complex situation of creating wearable AR, is like that. You can rearrange the tour by sliding it around. You can move different stops. You can do linear, non-linear, and that's where right now that's where we're the rubber meets the road in terms of what our company's doing. Let's see. Go to the next slide here, the bigger picture. So this is just a little simulation of something we did at Mount Vernon. The guy in the middle is how we orient what we're layering over the real world landscape. That is you, right, with your arms out. And so in this case, we took a series of 8 or 9 portraits that you would never in the real world be able to see together. But for storytelling purposes, we wanted to put them in the same context. And we created a 360 view. So as you're standing there in the museum, you'll be able to literally turn in the glasses and see each of these paintings represented in front of you in a real world context. Here's just an example of a little dragon we put together for something that we launched in Spain. And you can be outside and we can pinpoint that dragon at points in the air so that the dragon, which in this case is associated with a myth that they have over there, that dragon flies around you in the real world and helps tell a more interesting story. One of the objectives here is to do what we call AR for a purpose, right? The idea is not to do this because you can do it and it's another envelope that we're pushing in technology. We like to deploy augmentations that actually serve some social good, some social end. At a wax museum in DC, prior to us launching there, if you were to go see the section on civil rights, that's Miss Rosa Parks sitting there in wax. And the interactivity previously would be, there would be an open chair there and you could sit next to her, right? That's about as interesting as it got. For a while, they had a little 1950s bus seat that if you knew to sit on it, and most people didn't, it would jiggle a little bit. That was their level of interactivity. So what they asked us to do was to give it some emotional punch. And what we did was literally put the viewer in the bus seat that Rosa Parks occupied from her own perspective. And I'll show you that in just for a second. So what that gentleman is doing is looking up and looking all around at something that we produced. And this is what it ends up looking like. We hope. There's going to be a lot of links uploaded to the chat that you guys can watch after this. Let's see. I can do this real quick. I'm going to play it for you over here. Let me know if you can see this. Hold on. Can you see it? Okay, there's not supposed to be any audio. You're just seeing video here.
Yes.
So what we did was, you're seated where Rosa Parks was on the bus.
Greg, you muted yourself.
So there's not supposed to be any audio here. What you're seeing is the view of Rosa Parks on the bus. You see the white bus driver come back and tell you you need to give up your seat and move to the back of the bus. If you turn and look, literally you're going to see other passengers and you can read their emotional reaction to the situation. In this case, our staff got the bus, hired the actors, put it in black and white, filmed it. And the emotional punch, even in a wax museum that's supposed to be entertaining and light, of being able to feel the situation that Parks was in, even to this kind of degree, leaves people with a deep and lasting impression. I'm gonna go back to the other one here. One challenge in our business is these files are so large that PowerPoint has yet to catch up with the ability to use them all. Let's see, screen share. All right, back here, and all right. So another example is we're working at a museum, at an aquarium. You may ask yourself, why in the world would someone want to augment an aquarium? Isn't the whole thing interactive? Isn't it constantly moving? The answer is they want to augment it because they want to tell a conservation story that they cannot tell at their current exhibit. There are large and endangered fish that cannot appear in today's aquariums. If you want to demonstrate the impacts of pollution on the oceans, you cannot pollute the real fish in the aquarium, but we can do that in augmented reality. If you want to constantly have the scientists that are doing real conservation work out in the field, you can't bring those scientists into the aquarium and have them there available full time. And so the consequence is we can bring all of that stuff into that environment. We'll see if this shows it to you. In this case, what we're doing is we've set up a game for kids and teenagers where you can, with the remote, remove the plastic from where the turtles are swimming, right? Because turtles consist of view plastic, jellyfish, and eat them. You're not going to put plastic in the actual tanks of the fish, but we can do that in an augmented environment. Final example I'll give you here, and I'm going to let you sign up for the tour, but I'll give you a teaser here, is that my colleague Lexi, who's on the left, who really is, I don't know what we would do as a company without her, but she is our kind of chief visionary for these tours. Lexi's from Richmond. Her family's been here many, many years. And she saw an opportunity to give kind of a gift to the community by designing a augmented reality tour of Monument Avenue. Lasts about an hour and a half. It is very dialogue intense. If you want to get deep into the origins of these monuments leading up to the point of their removal, you want to sign up for this experience with Lexi. But the point here, once again, is not just to put out a tour that makes money. In this case, not at all, because this is offered free. The point is to capture a set of factual data that can provide a mature conversation about a subject around which people sometimes have difficulty having non-emotional conversations. It's to spark dialogue, and it's to prove that this technology can be adapted in other communities that are going through similar struggles. This might be See if this works as a teaser. I'll put the link up to it. There you go. So when you're actually at the monument, we can layer over historical images over the actual real world situation. We can put text boxes up to tell you information that you wouldn't be able to discern at the site. We can not just do historical, we can post graffiti that was there 2 months ago and is no longer there. So it's really a time machine, not always to the distant past, but to a scenario that can be very recent. Here's just a simulation of something we did in Italy, where you've got nothing but ancient ruins, and we want to simulate the glass is coming down. All right, Christine's going to put that link in the chat. So I want to transition away from the details of that company and just for a couple of minutes draw out some big trends about where technology is headed and what kind of fundamental questions it poses to us as members of society. There are 4 trends that I would suggest that if you have any bandwidth in your life and you want to pay attention to the intersection of how history is impacting technology and how technology is impacting history, you want to be looking at augmented and virtual reality, drones and satellites. I have a friend who's a professor who won the $1 million TED Prize and was on Stephen Colbert because she's a space archaeologist. She, from space, uses military-grade satellite imagery to find hundreds of archaeological sites that are buried in the jungle that archaeologists would never find, and she does it by layering over that satellite data an app that measures things like the chloroform levels in the jungle over sites, which will be less if you're building over rocks than otherwise, right? All kinds of amazing things going on and going on at a greater speed. 3D scanning and printing is really helping us deal with things like the black market trade in antiquities. But the thing I want to focus you on for just a couple of minutes is artificial intelligence and its impact on history and the role of cultural history on AI. This chart roughly represents the theory that there has been an exponential growth in the power and prominence of technology over the past 600 years. You got the printing press on the left, and on the right, you have, cell phones, DVDs, 3D printers. And what you see is that growth potential is approaching a direct vertical curve. What does that mean in the real world? Here's some stuff that might kind of blow you away. During World War II, knowledge was doubling roughly every 25 years. Now, human knowledge, as measured by captured data, doubles every 12 months. There's more data been produced in the world in the past 2 years than in all of prior history. 90% of all the scientists that have ever lived are alive today. The latest version of your iPhone is roughly 150 million times faster than the computers that managed the moon landing, right? There is such a thing, by the way, as a digital toaster, and that digital toaster is faster and more powerful than the equipment that landed people on the moon, right? What gets to be interesting, and I say interesting as this scares some people, is that artificial intelligences are using their own power to invent their successors. So computers, as opposed to humans, are now programming the next generation of computers. Not to be too scared, the bottom line is 86% of all people still plug their USBs in upside down, right? So our progress is somewhat limited. By 2037, these are not kind of Star Trek-y projections. Most folks who focus on kind of futurism grounded in real technology think that these are not crazy predictions. They're relatively common. By 2037, most of us will own 100 devices that are connected to the web in some form. Anything that you can think about in your house, your car, your work. We're already seeing nanobots introduced into the bloodstream to cure disease. We will see that in the brain. 95% of the developed world's diseases will likely be eradicated by that time. They will be solved by superintelligence programs as opposed to humans. The Turing test, which is the famous test of whether artificial intelligence faking being human and humans can be distinguishable, that Turing test will have finally been met. You won't be able to tell the difference between artificial intelligence and humans. The concept of uploading someone's consciousness is predicted within this time frame. And then the singularity is predicted to occur within 10 years of 2037. What is the singularity? Singularity is this hypothesis that artificial intelligence will eventually, on an exponential curve, begin to self-improve such that every generation is exponentially more powerful and is invented by the artificial intelligence before it. What happens to humans in that scenario? That is the big question for our time, for those who obsess about this kind of thing. Here's a little snippet that I thought captured it. The vision of the singularity, which is that point on the curve at which the aggregate artificial intelligence surpasses the aggregate computing power of human brains, that's called the singularity, right? And in this context, the theory is that those super intelligent machines will supersede the evolution of human thought. And what happens at that point? Who writes the history? Is it the machines writing the history, or are the machines informed in some way by their understanding of human history? Here's a fun little graph that I think captures some people's theory of how folks will be evolving. Upright, downright, and then C3PO. Here are some thought-provoking questions, hopefully not sleep-depriving questions. Google just fired 2 of its lead AI ethicists, the people who are in charge with asking questions like, should AI learn from human history? Should AI benefit from human judgment as opposed to a pure calculus? There is an absence of historians and ethicists at the table in the rooms where artificial intelligence is being invented. I argue, for anyone who will pay attention this far into the speech, that historians and ethicists absolutely need to be at the table. We see already that the current folks that are designing this software are largely white men of a certain perspective focused on STEM. Other perspectives, female perspectives, other gender perspectives, non-white perspectives, non-STEM perspectives are not represented in how we're programming artificial intelligence. So here are the final questions. What does it mean for an artificial intelligence to understand human history? What would be the moral, intellectual, and ethical implications of developing an AI that understands human history? Should they understand all of our mistakes as well as our successes? And who defines what is a mistake and what is a success? Who defines what lessons are learned from human history and then translated into ones and zeros for machines that will eventually be making decisions in our daily lives, right? So I want to pause there. I understand we've got 7 minutes. And I look forward to reading the chat where people say, is this guy out of his mind? Which is, there's got to be at least 3 of those comments, and half of those are from my staff, I'm sure. So I'll pause there, and Nancy, look forward to any questions that you've got.
Great. Thank you, Greg. We have a number of questions. At the end, you touched on a couple of them about how is it that you interact with the content? Is it the organization you're working with that's giving you the content, the historians, ethicists, et cetera? And given what your law firm does, I think people wonder how that all interacts about the validity of the content.
2 good questions. there's a spectrum of relationships that we have with museums and clients. Some of them want us to do everything, figure out vendors to develop content, arrange the content, write the script. Some of them want to just have access to our software because they have in-house folks, and we think we've made the software easy enough where they can just take the software and do the whole project deployment themselves. Typically, however, we like to have a hand in reviewing the content because you can imagine a dangerous situation where some perspective would get out in a story that that maybe is inaccurate or unaware, and that could impact our company's reputation. So we generally ask for a relationship where it's a collaborative storytelling effort. And then with respect to the law firm, there's no direct relationship except to say that whenever we need a subject matter expert, let's say we're doing something at a museum that involves particular art, or maybe it's a Holocaust museum, it is wonderful to be able to turn to my colleagues on the law and policy side and deal with folks who have been dealing with the law, policy, and ethics of Holocaust era art for 40 years, and to get their perspective on it. So one of the things I think distinguishes us as a company is we're trying to do the things that I just complained about in those slides. We're trying to bring technologists together with subject matter experts because the end product we think is more humane, it's more interesting, it's more compelling than it would be if we were just a technology vendor going from one site to the next. Other
Perfect.
questions?
Thank you, Greg.
Mhm.
Excellent. We believe that, is it true that you raised some venture capital for this? And if the answer is yes, the question is, was that local?
Yes, we've raised $2.something million in seed, and almost all of it was from the Virginia-based venture funds. That was intentional on our part. It's not that I don't love to go to California, but the folks that have been very generously investing in our startup here are folks that I've known for many years, people I trust, people like Jim Ukrop and others who are grounded, and they know that I won't blow smoke. And I think there are a lot of companies that are rewarded for blowing smoke about what they can do. And we've tried to be brutally honest about what our successes are and what our challenges are as a company. And I think that's appealed to folks. But I want us to be a story about, I want us to be a surprising success story about technology from an unexpected place. And that's why we're so glad to be here in Richmond.
Great, thank you. And a number of us are in awe because our favorite place to visit is Italy. So to know that that is your other epicenter is really interesting, and didn't know all the historical elements. Some of us visit for some other like wine and things like that. Is it also a special place for you, or was it because of the large number of like the content for you was so rooted there? What really made you say we're based in Richmond and Milan?
Yes, two elements. One, the best guy I could find who is a genius in this technology is Italian. Two, like any person of even modest intelligence, Italy, I would be happy to spend 9 out of every 10 hours in Italy drinking wine. And my wife and I, when we started our law firm and when we started this business, we wanted to be the first, best, or only doing what we were doing, but we also wanted to travel to exotic places, largely paid for by other people. And so part of our strategy was, if we can do a tech company that takes us to Italy on a regular basis. And you mentioned wine. One of the first deployments we did was at the largest wine conference in the world. You're walking through, a regular convention center. You could put on our glasses at one of the booths and be transported to the vineyard where you were actually sipping the wine at the same time, and you could see the down through the layers of soil in the glasses that produced the actual wine that you were drinking. So as Christine, my colleague who's on here, knows, we try and combine AR with wine as much as possible. If there was a sub tagline for our business, that would be it.
Well, you're speaking my language, Greg, and I think that of many others. At this point, we're hitting up against the time constraint, so I'm going to pass this back over to Stan.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Greg. I have one quick question. Your predictions for the year 2037 was why is 2037 a significant year?
I think,
or was it just coincidence?
I think these predictions were made beginning about 25 years from 2037. And largely the folks that have been making these predictions are kind of the Bill Gates, Ray Kurzweils of the world. If you haven't read Ray's work, he's a futurist that was hired by Google to be their head of future thinking. And he wrote a book called The Singularity is Near. I read it on a flight to Beijing years ago, came home, bought 25 copies, sent them to every elected official in Virginia. I only got 2 responses. Mark Warner wrote back and told me I needed to get out on dates more. And Don Beyer, as is his wont, wrote a very thoughtful note about the future of history. And I say that because I love both of those gentlemen, but it was a symbolic response, I think, to sometimes the reception I get to this pitch, which is, Greg, you must be really bored with what's going on in your life, or, hey, this is pretty interesting.
Well, the reason I ask is it occurred to me that at first it seemed like a long ways away, and then I thought about it and realized it's really only about the same amount of time since we invented the iPhone, or since we had the smartphone. And I think that's interesting. It's not as far away as it sounds anymore. But.
No, and human beings are used to, we've lived historically on a linear timeline. So our brains have a difficult time understanding exponential growth, which is why we are constantly surprised now every day about what's coming down the road. It's because, things didn't come down the road for most of human history. I appreciate everyone's time. I'm gonna send to you all, either through the chat or whatever follow-up links to anything that worked or didn't work in the PowerPoint presentation. And I look forward to any questions people have offline afterwards. I appreciate the chance.
All right. And I'd like some instructions on how to get my toaster to fly me to the moon. I'm interested in that.
Digital toasters, I think they're $300. So
that's right. Well, thank you again. It's been some of the most interesting chat I've seen since we've been doing this. And as I said to everyone, this will be online, and you can go back and look at it again in the future. And we may have you back, Greg, to talk about some other things like this. So thank you again. And with that, everybody, we will see you on June 22nd, one way or the other, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you all for coming. So long.
Have a great Memorial Day.
You too. Thanks.